Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the match preview with me, Andrew Musgrove, and John Gibson. Not the match preview we expected to bring you because we were going to do a special episode looking back on Newcastle's win over Wimbledon down at Plough Lane and then looking ahead to the game at Manchester City. Of course, that game did not go ahead because of some flooding on the pitch, and the game has been rearranged and relocated to St James's Park next Tuesday coming up. But it means we have a free run now at Manchester City, and that's what we're going to talk about for the next hour. We promise we will try and find some positives to look at ahead of the Manchester City game, because if you look at it on paper, if you look at Newcastle's performances at the start of this season, it paints a pretty gloomy picture, but we will try our best to be positive at some point in the next hour or so. John, welcome back to the podcast. How are you keeping? You well?
I'm keeping good. Despite what happened at Fulham and what happened at Wimbledon and the prospect of Man City squaring up to us, I'm still feeling good.
Good. I'm glad to hear it because it is a daunting challenge. Man
Yeah.
City, the visitors on Saturday. I mean, anyone that's watched them this season, they've been absolutely brilliant. Okay, they weren't too fantastic against Arsenal when they had the man advantage, but they got the point in the end, and they are a force to be reckoned with. The big plus, I guess, for Newcastle, John, is that they're missing Rodri. Man City are missing their star man in the middle. They've still got a host of other players to worry about. But from a Newcastle point of view, Man City not having their star man in midfield will be a big plus.
Well, in a way, they haven't got two star men in midfield because there's Rodri and De Bruyne, of course, who will be also be missing. Um, that is a plus, or it would be a plus with any other team bar City, but they've got more stars than a cloudless night sky, haven't they? I mean, they just replace two with another two. Whereas if the same thing happened to Newcastle and two of their top players happen to be out, and they happen to be Isak and Pope, where we haven't got cover, we would be in disarray. I'm not certain how much disarray City's going to be in by missing Rodri and De Bruyne, because they've been playing without those two on occasions. And I mean, I just looked at their record, not trying to frighten us, but trying to be realistic about what we're facing. So then, if we get any sort of result, which includes a draw, we'll be grateful. Just in the 2020s alone, which is the last 4 years, I mean, they're the Premier League leaders. They've been champions the last 4 seasons, title winners 7 out the last 10, going a little bit further back. FA Cup 2023, League Cup 2021, in Europe, Champions League 2023, Super Cup 2023, World Club Champions 2023. Now that's some record. Now, against that, we've won out in that same time, but that's to be expected, and that is a cruel comparison because we got our takeover with oil money a lot later than they did. And in fairness, in that time, we've made a Wembley final, we've made the top four of the Premier League, and we've played in the Champions League and had that wonderful night with Paris Saint Germain. So it's an unfair comparison, but it just tells us that this team is a step above where we are currently at, in a step above where most people are currently at. There's only Arsenal that give them a real challenge. Um, to be truthful, they are that good, and that's a task facing us. And of course, what makes us shudder a little bit is that it follows immediately on our worst performance of the season and our first defeat at Fulham. It was certainly the worst performance in the first half. It got a little bit better, but it was. We've been worried about it. We've talked about it, Andrew, on this podcast. Is it going to happen sometime? Because we've been getting results against everything our eyes told us. Um, and sure enough, it did. And it was a bit of a shock and a shaker, to be truthful, because it was so bad. And my feeling is that, I would want to sort of grasp onto something by saying, well, Man City had to play a day after us. They played Sunday instead of Saturday. They had a bruising match, both physically and mentally, against Arsenal. Then they had a League Cup tie, which was not the top stars, and they won. But trying to think maybe they're a bit more weary than we will be. But in a way, I think the Wimbledon match off is a blow to us because we could have tried a couple of things, say in midfield, for example, to see if they come off, albeit against League Two opposition, but try it and then reshuffle the pack again for City, having had a morale booster with a win in the League Cup. We've been denied that, so I'm a bit sad that it was off. I think it would have worked in our favour to be on. But there we are. You've got what you've got, and it is a huge match, but it's not an impossible match.
No, I agree with you. I think I would have wanted that game to go ahead, to see Newcastle United progress, to get the good feeling of progression in the cup, but also, like you say, just to get that winning feeling back and build a little bit of momentum heading in to Saturday. But I'm glad, John, that you crushed the real one positive that I had about Rodri missing out. And you've crushed that positive, so thanks for that. We'll have to try and dig a little bit deeper and look at some positives that Newcastle United can bring to this fixture. I mean, look, at home, they are a different beast, Newcastle United. Again, maybe the performances, well, not maybe, certainly the performances haven't been great at home, but they are good at home. And we've seen before when Man City come up here, Newcastle United give them a really good game. They've been unfortunate the last few fixtures not to at least get a point. That being said, Newcastle have won just one of the last 33 Premier League games against Manchester City, drawing 5 and losing 27. That win came back in January 2009 under Rafa Benitez. So history not on the side of Newcastle United, but I do think, and it's that old cliche, John, the 12th man, the crowd are going to have such an important role on Saturday. Everyone pulling in the same direction. We want every kick, tackle, cheered. I do think once again we will see, as we saw last season in that 3-2 defeat here, for the first 45 minutes an hour, I know Man City struggled until they introduced De Bruyne to the field, and it was partly because of the atmosphere that the crowd whipped up. It's a little bit different when it's a 12:30 kickoff, but hopefully the crowd can have a similar impact in Newcastle. The players on the pitch can buy into that, embrace it, and use it to their advantage.
I mean, if you want that little bit of hope, if I'm accused of knocking down the Rodri confidence, I'll give you a little bit of hope with this. However good Manchester City are, and they are outstanding, they're champions for 4 successive seasons and are top of the pile going for a fifth season. They are not unbeatable. They are not unbeatable. They are not Arsenal's Invincibles, who went a full season unbeaten. Manchester City, in the last 4 seasons when they won the title, have never been unbeaten in those 4 seasons. In other words, they do lose a game or a couple of games in a 38-game season. So they're unbeaten this season, but they're not going to remain unbeaten for the whole of the season in the Premier League. I'm convinced of that. History tells us that. Therefore, if they're going to lose, why not lose at Newcastle, who are a different proposition at home than they are away? And this will be a test for them. So it is not impossible. Nothing is impossible in a two-horse race. I mean, all the great history of the FA Cup scattered with giant killings. Giant killings are one-off. They wouldn't have, if teams played each other 100 times, 99 times, the big club would win. Once the small club would win, but that small club does win one. That's in the FA Cup. We aren't a small club. But why not Newcastle be the team to beat Man City? They are going to lose somewhere. Now, at the moment, everything tells us that I'm talking with my heart there and not my head, because performances have not indicated that we're about to do something as good as that, and their performances have not indicated that they're about to suddenly collapse. New, there are huge decisions to be made, and a lot of them to be made before the game. The team selection, for example, when we get the team sheet an hour and a quarter or whatever it is these days before kickoff, that will tell us an awful lot, and that is will have a huge bearing on the game, as the crowd will have. As the crowd will have. But we've also got to hope, Andrew, that some of our blue chip players suddenly start playing well, because they haven't. I mean, you can go through all our blue chip players: Bruno, Big Joe, Anthony Gordon, Alexander Isak, and they've all been below par. And that's quite staggering. And it's a little bit frightening when they're all below par together. You can get one off form, but if the other three are cooking, you're in business. The only fella that's probably big hitting a little bit more than anybody than is normal is probably Harvey Barnes with his goals. Um, but we are not. A, Eddie's got to get his team selection right, and B, our big hitters have got to cast any cloak of apprehension or um, and get rid of it and go back to doing what they did regularly for us over the last couple of seasons.
If you were invited into the dressing room, say midday on Saturday afternoon, John, and Eddie Howe said, "Right, Gibbo, here's your opportunity. You're going to deliver the team talk." What would you say to the players ahead of the game against Man City?
Well, in the main, I would say that whatever has happened this season, it's almost impossible for you not to get the feedback from fans who have become apprehensive, from media that's become apprehensive, that you haven't played well, that you've rode your luck, that you're not as good as you think you are. And that culminated in our worst performance at Fulham. So, is there a better opportunity than to have Man City at home next to come out and show everybody what this club, what this dressing room, and what these 19 players are all about? Go back to basics. Throw off your cloak of apprehension. Start well. Start aggressively. You will get the crowd on your side if you start off on the right foot and keep going. And remember how good you are. Bruno, remember why you were made skipper. Not remember that ball that you put across the face of your own goal of Fulham. Remember why you were made skipper. Joe Linton, remember why we were so desperate to give you this new contract last season and make certain you stayed with us. Isaac, go tonight when you go to bed, instead of counting sheep, count your 25 goals and think, I got 25 goals last season. That's how good I am. And I might only have 1 and 6 this season, but you'll get back to that. Anthony Gordon, think of the year you had where you were a European champion with England under 21s, when you were our player of the season, when you got in the full England side and now have become a regular under a new manager. Realize how good you are and go back to doing that. You know you can do it. Clear your head, all of you, of the cotton wool and the apprehension and the maybe this and the maybe that. Remember that you're good. Remember, you've got a crowd that's better than anywhere in the country, desperate for you to be success, and have that collective defiance that we're going to show everybody. And if we're going to do that, is there a better platform than Manchester City? If you bloody Manchester City's noses, that's better than beating Fulham at home because it has more impact. You can right a lot of wrongs in one 90-minute spell. Go out and do it.
You mentioned a few players there: Bruno, Joe Linton, Anthony Gordon. Does that hint at your team sheet for Saturday? Because there's a lot of talk about maybe Anthony Gordon dropping out, Joe Linton potentially dropping out. I think there's been a lot of criticism, rightly, on Bruno's performances, but there's no way that he drops out. But given the three players you've mentioned there, am I right in thinking, John, that you think all three will start on Saturday?
Well, again, it's what I always say, but I'll answer that. It just depends whether I'm supposed to have Eddie Howe's hat on or my hat on. For example, as you said, there's absolutely no question whatsoever that Eddie Howe will even contemplate leaving Bruno out. I would contemplate leaving Bruno out because I think he didn't just have a bad game at Fulham because he played the ball across his own box when we were still technically in with a chance of snatching an equaliser, and that took it away. I think he's been frightening throughout that game and throughout this season. His lack of pace, it's always been there. You don't suddenly become slow unless you're 36 and then you're 37 birthday you are slow. He is one pace, but players are running away from him now. If you remember, the bloke that started the move at Wolves and brought the goal took the ball off Longstaff. and started the whole move, broke himself from midfield, and Bruno tried to trail him and let him go, and then he did the wonderful dummy to send everybody the wrong way for their goal. Bruno has looked startlingly bad, and he's having a poor season. He's been doing poor for Brazil. He was substituted at half time in the last Brazil international. He is having a tough time of it. Joe Linton, after a wonderful game up here on the opening day, is having a tough time of it. Both of them, if you forget their names and you forget what they've done for this club in previous seasons, both of them on form have no right to start or to expect to start automatically on Saturday. And for me, you look at our midfield, and in theory, it's chock a block full of talent. When you think Bruno, Joe Linton, Tonali, Willock, and Longstaff, you think, by Jove, that's a selection headache. Who does he leave out? They're all quality players. You know my answer? The only one that automatically deserves to be in on Saturday for me is the one that's not in, Tonali. I mean, if Bruno was dropped, and he won't be because Eddie won't do that to him. But if Bruno was dropped, he couldn't complain. If Joe Linton was dropped, he couldn't complain. Uh, if Joe Willock was left out, he couldn't complain. Tonali, I think, could complain if he was left out. It is frightening. And one of the reasons that you look at that midfield that I named, five guys there, they're all terrific, Andrew, but they're all terrific at one thing. They're all terrific at going forward. They're all terrific at attacking. We have mentioned on this podcast many times, and I banged on about it last season as well. Why haven't we got a number six? We People run through our midfield when we haven't got a ball. People have got a passage from the edge of their box to the edge of our box almost unchallenged. Now, the thought is that Bruno can do that six job, but I tell you what, Andrew, he doesn't want to. Bruno wants to put on the Superman cape and go charging up the field into the attack. And good on him, as long as somebody's locking the back door at the back. Tonali is supposed to be able to do a six job, and both Bruno and Tonali have played in that position, but I don't think it's a natural game. We haven't had a six. We fleetingly sort of doffed our cap to the fact we might need one when we looked at Kevin Phillips early on, when we were thinking about how well he played there for Leeds, and I was all against him coming here because he was playing so badly for Manchester City, and we escaped that situation, but at least we acknowledged that we might have needed a six. I think we need a six. They're running through our midfield. It looks terrific. On paper, can you think of a better midfield if they're on form than Bruno, Joe Linton, Tonali? If they were on form, you think that midfield is as good as most in the Premier League. And yet, Tonali can't get a start, and the other two have been awful.
I agree. And I think what's interesting that even though you're right on paper, if those three were fully fit and they were playing and they were on form, it still puts pressure on the offensive side of the team to be clinical in front of goal, to create chances, and when you do, to put them back in the back of the net, because as soon as Newcastle United go forward and they lose the ball, they're going to get hit on the counter and they're not going to be able to manage it because all three, as you say, don't seem to have that discipline where one of them sits and protects. They all want to go forward. And interestingly, I think Sandro Tonali has played the majority of his career as a defensive midfielder, according to transfermarket.com. But for Newcastle, now he's only played 15 games for Newcastle, but only twice has he turned out in that defensive midfield role. Whereas for AC Milan, it was something like 160 times he's done that, something like that off the top of my head. So, there is a hint that he could be that number six, but whether this formation is right for it, I'm not too sure. And that was the next question I was going to ask you, John. Can you see a formation change coming? Personally, I can't. I don't think he'll make that big change ahead of Man City. Some say, well, there's a technical five at the back, but I can't see that happening. You could maybe see it happening maybe kind of in-game, for want of a better phrase, where he maybe does adapts, but from the team sheet, I don't think will drop and we'll have five defenders in it.
No,
I think it'll be the same formation.
even though it's Man City, We are at home, and Newcastle are the best at home when they're on the front foot. And I think if we were playing away from home, for example, if we were playing at Man City, you may well look at that. I don't think he'll particularly look at that now because if you're going to put five at the back, you've got to sacrifice somebody in the middle of the field or up top. And we're already struggling in the middle of the field. I mean, obviously, we've got to say that Eddie Howe has been very, very successful at Newcastle while he's been here, and we know what he's done in the last couple of seasons. And he doesn't feel a necessity for an out and out number six to be bought like I do, and like I suspect you do, and like I suspect one or two fans do. He doesn't seem to really put too much on that because while we've been told he wants a right-sided centre half and an outside right, and a goalkeeper was always in, and a centre forward because of Callum Wilson, we have never heard about a consistent outcry for a number six. I think he believes that Bruno can do that job, and maybe he can. Tonali could well do the job because he has done it. But somebody has got to do it. Somebody has got to sit and stop these sides. And by the way, if you want to beat Man City, you've got to get a grip in that midfield because they pass, and they'll pass you to death. And they will pass out of the midfield and go round us, and if we attack, they will counter us in an open midfield and just run through us. And then the big beast is unleashed in Erling Haaland. We've got to do something about that midfield. Eddie has done terrific for this club, so I'm not going to have a big go at Eddie. But Eddie, whatever happens, you can't go in the transfer market till January anyway. So will you please sit down, Bruno and Tonali, and look at them in the eye and put blinkers on one of them and say, you're going to sit and you're going to give us protection. And the other two are going to go. And the number six job is yours for Saturday, Bruno, or it's yours for Saturday, Sandro. But somebody's got, if we just send the three out, supposing we pick the three, supposing we pick Joe Linton, Bruno, and Tonali, which is the three I think everybody in the summer was talking about would be Newcastle's midfield once Tonali was available again, then then that's got to be organised, hasn't it? Somebody's got to do some of the dirty work. Occasionally, we used to have Longstaff do the dirty knees work to a certain extent in running back, etc., etc. But we've got to have somebody do that job. They're running through us far too easily these days.
And when you consider the opposition that they've faced already this season, and we've had these concerns, we've had these worries, and yes, they've picked up points where maybe they didn't deserve to, but then you really focus on who Newcastle are playing this Saturday. Goodness me. Look, I know I said at the start we'll try and find positives, and I promise you we will get to one as the show goes on. But if you're asking me right now, from 1 to 10, how worried I am about Saturday, I'm on a 9. And that's probably the positive, that I don't want to just say a 10, because actually I'm probably a 10, because the midfield's just such an issue. And the one club that you do not want to face when you've got these issues, when you've definitely got a confidence issue, when you've got a discipline issue, when you've got an organization issue, when you've got a team that doesn't really know what it seems to be doing, when you've got a manager who isn't believing in his own picks and he keeps changing the side, you don't want Man City rocking up on your doorstep. And I know people say, Newcastle United, they always raise their game against the biggest and best opposition. Okay, fair enough. Yep, we've seen that in the past. But I tell you what I have seen from Newcastle in the opening 4 or 5 games of the season, despite the points they've picked up, does not fill me with a lot of confidence heading into Saturday. I'll be watching with my hands over my eyes, because I just think no matter what Eddie Howe has done this week on the training pitch, no matter what he said to them, no matter what he's drilled into them, no matter how the training practices or the training exercises have gone or haven't gone, I just don't think there's enough time to solve the issues, the fundamental issues, before Man City rock up with the players they've got. Yes, they haven't got Rodri, but they've got the likes of Foden, they've got the likes of Haaland that you've mentioned. You could name a host of other players. I mean, Foden hasn't even been playing. it'll just be our luck, John, that he'll start on Saturday and end up scoring 3. Newcastle United, they cannot play the way they've played all this season against Man City because it'll just be a cricket score.
What's going to be very interesting, Eddie, and I've got to emphasise that this isn't a bash Eddie over the head session simply because we lost for the first time at Fulham and played very poorly. Eddie's been absolutely terrific for us, and we will keep faith in him. No question about that, and so we should, and he deserves that. But we have to say that in the last 2 games, by his own admission, he's got his team selections wrong. By his own admission, because at half time in the last 2 games, he's made no fewer than 5 changes, Andrew, at half time. At half time, that's so early. That's telling you that the team, hey, and good of them for being brave enough to do that. And it worked in the second half against Wolves. It didn't work in the second half against Fulham, although we were a lot better. But that, first and foremost, tells you the team I selected was the wrong team. If you've got to change it as early as 45 minutes instead of the traditional any time after an hour situation with subs, then it tells you that you've got the wrong team. Therefore, I'm going to watch with great interest to see what team Eddie starts with on Saturday, both in terms of his midfield 3, in terms of his front 3, which I think, in fairness, should pick themselves, but also in terms of his right back and left back. Does he start with Livramento or Trippier? And does he start with Hall or Kelly? And there are big questions to be answered. And certainly, right back, left back, in your middle 3 are right up there in who do I start with and who do I leave out. And his team selection, we've got to pray he gets it right. Because I tell you what, if we are making 3 changes at half time against City, it's because we're 2 goals down, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the team selection's the really interesting one. I mean, I'll give you what I think Howe will do, and then I'll give you what I would do. I think Howe will play Nick Pope, Kieran Trippier, Fabian Schär, Dan Burn, Lewis Hall. I think he'll then go Bruno, Joe Linton, and Tonali, Gordon, Isaac, and Barnes. I would go Pope, Livramento, because I just worry whoever Trippier comes up against, he's that leader, he's that captain that I think Newcastle are probably missing in game. But I do worry that if he gets up against a pacey winger, there's only really going to be one winner. So whether that's Doku, whether that's Grealish, whether that's Savino, who might come in on that side, I don't know. It could be anyone. It could be Foden. I do worry a foot race with Kieran Trippier is only going to end one way. I would play Schär, but I would play Lloyd Kelly alongside him. I think going up against Haaland, you need that little bit of extra pace in it. Schär doesn't offer that. Dan Burn doesn't offer that. I think Lloyd Kelly can get a little bit closer to Haaland than the other two. But I think he will stick with Dan Burn, and then it'll be Lewis Hall. The rest of it, I would go with. I just think my biggest concern going forward, John, is Isaac. I just think he's been really isolated, and I think again on Saturday we're gonna see him isolated again. And when he is so alone at top, he's having to drop deep to get the ball, but then there's no outlet. So that's the other thing that worries me as well.
I can follow that absolutely totally. Um, Isaac has only got 1 goal in 6 games this season, and if you after 25 last season, gorging himself. But if you compare Isaac's current form, 1 and 6, with Haaland's current form, which is 100 goals and 105 appearances for City, it frightens you. But uh, certainly Isaac has had no service, nothing to feed him at all in these games. And of course, because he's such a good footballer, he will drop deeper and deeper, and he will go out wide to try to get on the ball and make things happen. But as you say, that leaves us without an outlet through the middle if he is doing that sort of thing. We need him to step up to the plate. And if we are talking about our midfielders and who've been quality attackers when they're on form, well, they've got to lend support to Isaac. They've not just ammunition to him by supplying him, but also by physically supporting him at his shoulder, getting forward, be that Big Joe left side, or be it Bruno, or be it Tonali, depending on who sits. He's got to get more support because his service has been quite dreadful. But even with a lack of service, when he's been on the ball, whatever position on the field, he hasn't looked the Isaac we know in his pomp, has he? He hasn't looked his body language, his bounce, is not quite what it was. And I mean, I look at Gordon last season. I could just enjoy myself by sitting back with a cigar and watching Anthony Gordon run at defenders who didn't know whether he was going outside or whether he was coming inside. And every fullback ended up corkscrewed into the ground because they were turning round. They all were taken off with a twisted sock. I mean, it was wonderful to watch. I watch him now, and he looks like a young man with all the cares of the world on his shoulders. I mean, I don't know what's happened. Now, if something's happened in training, if something, apart from the obvious answer, the easy answer, his head's been turned by Liverpool, Isaac's been turned by Arsenal fancying him and everybody else fancying him. And it's easy to go down that route, and maybe that's got something to do with it. Maybe also there's something to do with the fact that we have been told that the reason why we had so many injuries last season was because of the intensity we played at and the intensity of the training to get us to play with that high press, where we swallowed clubs and were on them so quickly. The minute they got the ball, we were around them like vultures. I never see that intensity now in our play. Where's our identity? I can't see our identity. Now, is that because, and I don't know, I hasten to add, but is that because James Bunce has looked at it and said, well, one of the reasons you had a high number of injuries last season was that everything was so intense, everything was bang, 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 everything was straining muscles, everything was done at 100 miles an hour. If you want less injuries, you can't keep playing like that. If you remember, the Bielsa at Leeds got terrific success playing like that, but he couldn't sustain it season after season, and they ran into a lot of injuries. People like Bamford was never seen for half a season anymore. They ran into a lot of injuries because of the way he wanted them to play. Then they couldn't keep up that intensity, and the results fell off dramatically. Now, I don't know, but maybe one of the answers about not getting so many injuries is not to play with that intensity. And of course, the other side of that coin, if that is so, is that we then aren't as effective as we were last season. So it swings and roundabouts. But the one thing I do know, which I can say, Andrew, and none of we know the answer to that, apart from Eddie and James Bunce and everybody that watches them in training every day and all the players. One thing I do know is our identity that took us into fourth in the table in a Wembley Cup final and Champions League. That identity is not there at the moment. We do not look the same side in the way we're approaching games. We do not look the same side, and players don't look the happy. I mean, Anthony Gordon in his first 6 months here couldn't get in the team because he admitted he couldn't match the physicality Newcastle United had to match, and because it was asking so much more of players than it did players at other clubs, and he'd come from Everton, and it took him a while to get up to that. But when he got up to it last season, he was sensational. Now this season, he doesn't look the same. He doesn't look the same. Are we I mean, and the intensity isn't there. We know that because our eyes tell us that on a Saturday. But is it just we're unlucky? Is there any sort of reason other than there's a deliberate foot off the gas to improve on our injury record, which it has probably been improved on so far. I don't know. I'm gasping at straws, but Eddie has paid the big bucks to know the answer to that. And if the answer is we've got to sacrifice something to get less injuries, then we've got to find another way of playing that's just as effective as the high press was. But at the moment, I can't see our identity, and I don't see the Isaac I know. I don't see the Gordon I know. I don't see the Bruno or Big Joe I know. Now, I don't know why. If one of them was off colour, that's understandable with the other three. But together, all four who really set the tone of our team, the tone of our team are set by the big beasts, aren't they? They're set by Joe Linton and Bruno and Isaac and Gordon. And they haven't looked what they can be. Now, have they got to look at themselves and put it right? Each individually saying, I can do better than this and I'm determined to do it. Or is it a collective thing? I don't know. You don't know. The fans don't know. But Eddie has got to know. I presume he does know, but he's got to know because he's the only one that can produce the answer. And Eddie has got to know. And if it's something to do with what to do Monday to Friday, then it's up to them all to get together and find a good solution to get out of this. But at the moment, we are falling between two stools. We're not the team we were in terms of the way we approach games. And as a consequence, we're not successful, but we haven't found a different way of playing. We're trying to play the high press intensity game without being able to do it or without carrying it out successfully. Why?
Hmm. Well, for you guys watching and listening, do let us know either via the email at the AIBW podcast at reachplc.com or in the comments on YouTube. Why do you think Newcastle's intensity has gone? Really intrigued to understand your reasons for it. And if you've got any solutions, pop it into the comments as well. I think a lot of it's down to confidence as well. I think once they start performing a little bit better and we see more victories and more results, then I think we'll start to see everyone pick it up a level. But Saturday's definitely going to be difficult, shall we say. Just run me through your team, John, not Eddie Howe's team, but the team you would play.
Yeah, good question. Pretty well what's been mentioned already. I would go Pope, Livramento, Shaw. I'll stick with Burn because the options on there, and Hall. I would go with the three big beasts in midfield: Bruno, Joe Linton, and Tonali. Though that's all against what I would do. I think Sean Longstaff could bring in. If Joe Linton and Bruno are going to play like they have all this season, then Longstaff can be an improvement on one of them and would deserve to be in. I'm going with Bruno and Big Joe against my natural wishes because I don't think they deserve to be in. But I don't think for 1 second they're going to be dropped by Eddie. And the three up front, I think, pick themselves. I go Gordon, Isaac, and Harvey Barnes. Um, but really, Longstaff's got a case to be in that side, despite what a lot of fans think about him, etc., etc. Just because if Joe Linton wasn't Joe Linton and if Bruno wasn't Bruno, they wouldn't get in the side, at this given moment. But I don't think there's any chance of Bruno being dropped, none whatsoever. But I think he deserves it, and I think Longstaff will be very unlucky. And what's knocked my end in as well, to be truthful in the midfield, because I could have gone for Tonali, Longstaff, and Willock until I saw what Willock did in 45 minutes in his last game when he proved that he's match sharpness, nowhere near match sharpness, and therefore, all the good things he brings to the table, he's not capable of bringing to the table because physically he can't bring them to the table. But I mean, otherwise, I would have been very pleased to have a go with him. But I think that 45 minutes took him out the starting equation, and the most we can hope for is that we get half an hour out of him late in the game.
Yeah, no, I agree. I actually had Willock written down originally, and then I remembered that first 45 minutes against Fulham, and I've crossed him out. But I do think had he been fit, match fit, then he probably would have been in the midfield three alongside Bruno and Tonali. But who knows? Who knows, John? We never know with Eddie Howe. I mean, the key question, really, John, is how on earth do you stop Erling Haaland? I mean, he's just a different character altogether. arguably, it's going to pain me to say this, but there are claims that he's arguably the best striker the Premier League's ever seen. And if he continues at this rate, he's going to catch Alan Shearer's record with ease. He's just scary, isn't he? Okay, his all-round gameplay isn't brilliant. I agree with people who say Alexander Isak is the all-round better player. But when it comes to finishing and putting the ball in the back of the net, he's just the best. How did Newcastle stop him?
Well, when you say 100 goals in 105 games, that is sensational these days as well. Not back in the 20s when a lot of clubs won 6-5 and all that sort of business. I mean, the only record that's anywhere near that was Cristiano Ronaldo at Real Madrid, who had an average like 100 and 105. It is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, for 9/10 of a game, Andrew, you don't know he's on the field. He doesn't take part in build-up. He just stands on the edge of the box with the trigger of the gun cocked, waiting for the ball, and then he fires it, and it's a goal. And he's sensational at that. And I mean, is the best by a million miles. I mean, Big Al must be hoping that he's very shortly goes off to Real Madrid or something, be coveted by somebody abroad, so that his record stands for all time. And when we were clutching at straws, passing in the wind, and I said, and we said we'll come out with another one before the end of the podcast. Well, I've got a one for you now. Apart from the fact that Manchester City will not be unbeaten this season in the league in 38 league games, so why not this the game they lose? Another one I'll hit you with, Haaland, 100 goals and 105. I mean, I can't sleep between now and Saturday lunchtime thinking about that. But here's another fact. And you like stats, and I pretend I don't like stats, but I like this one. In four games with us, 3 in the Premier League and 1 in the FA Cup, Haaland has scored once in 4 games against us. So
You're
can we
tempting
keep him
fate.
quiet again? Can we keep him quiet again?
Well, you're tempting fate there, John. He's nailed on for
Well,
a hat trick now.
wait a minute. I've got to give you hope. And then when I give you hope, I'm tempting fate by giving you hope. I mean, I can't win here. I'm trying to give you a little bit of hope and our listeners a little bit of hope. And that is a fact. He's only scored 1 and 4. But when I say it, I'm tempting fate and he's going to get a hat trick now. Well, we can be all doom and gloom, or we can try to cling on to something.
Yeah, we can, and I appreciate you trying. But I've just in my head there, I've just had like a flashback to Saturday and watching Traore run around like he's a £100 million right winger, watching Iwobi running around like he's ruling the roost. And I just think we're there. These are two, with all due respect to them, average Premier League wingers, and they had Newcastle United on toast on Saturday. So what on earth are the likes of Jack Grealish if he starts, or whoever it is? What are they going to do to Newcastle United on Saturday? Like I'm sorry, I'm petrified. I am absolutely petrified about Saturday.
Well, it's just as well you're not playing. It's just as well you're not playing, because otherwise we'd be beaten before we go out. Because if you're petrified, you get what's coming your way. There's no question about that. And Newcastle United have got to talk the way I was talking early in this podcast, and what I would say in the dressing room if I was in there. I mean, I always remember Frank Bruno in the dressing room before he fought Mike Tyson. He was absolutely, he was like jelly. They couldn't get him out the dressing room and into the ring because he knew he was going to be massacred. And he almost sort of got off the stool and fell down just to stop the bitterest and hardest man on the planet planting him. And sure enough, he got done. But you've got to have some sort of hope and ability. And remember, and I'll repeat it, Manchester City will get beaten this season. Now, you'll come back to me and say, well, that'll probably be away at Arsenal, or it'll be away at Liverpool, and they'll only lose once. I tell you what, I'll venture something different. They'll get beaten once when they shouldn't. Remember when they played a few years back in the cup final against Wigan and lost 1-0? And it was after the takeover when everybody was there. It occasionally happens. So why can't Newcastle be the team that makes it happen? I'm like you. My head tells me that this is a forlorn grasping at straws match. My heart tells me that the only chance you've got to get something is that you've got to be positive, not gung ho, but positive. And I tell you what, and I don't want to play like Arsenal did in the second half a couple of nights back, but I tell you what, they run out of ideas, and when they equalised in the 97th minute, you'd think they'd won the Champions League the way they ran about in adulation. This was at home, 11 men against 10, and they got a draw and they went about, you would think they'd won the Champions League. They ran out of ideas what to do because they were faced with discipline. Uh, Not pretty, not the way I'd want to play it, but there were 10 men and had something to hang on to. And like it or not, Man City come out and said, "What a disgrace! We were the only side that wanted to play football and all that." What did they want Arsenal to do? Try to play football and make it 3-1, 4-1, and 5-1 so they would win with comfort on the counter, not a cat's chance. So, they are pretty good. But I'll repeat, I don't think the Arsenal's invincibles, and they haven't been they've won the title 7 times out the last 10 seasons, but not once have they done what Arsenal did when they were the invincibles. Sure, they're going to lose.
Well, fingers
That's
crossed it'll be
where it is.
on Saturday. And look, I think at home, it's a different prospect. Still fearing it, but when everyone is there singing and chanting and making noise, it is some atmosphere and it's some arena to call home. So that's given me a little bit of hope and a little bit of confidence that the atmosphere created can have a big impact, and then hopefully that will buoy the players up to beating Manchester City. I did, John, ask for people to get in touch ahead of me recording this episode with you, and I asked them what they were expecting on Saturday, and I have to say that out of the 25 responses I've had so far on X, the majority seem to be on the same train that I am and are a little bit petrified about Saturday. So I'll just read through some of the responses I've got, and then we can dive into your take on them. So Dave says, it's a free hit. We ain't expected to win. I want to see a good performance. Also, Bruno will play well, as it's possibly his future. That's pushing Bruno towards the Etihad there. Ursa says, can't see anything but defeat, unfortunately. But it is Newcastle United, so you never know. It's kind of like what you're saying there, John. We've got another one that says lots of goals and a 3-2 win for Newcastle. Best display of the season, which, let's face it, it won't be difficult. Midfield 3 should be Tonali, Bruno, and Joe Linton, and in brackets, Just. So this chap is feeling positive and confident. 3-2 win predicted there. We've got Sammy saying the crowd are going to play a huge role in depending what the outcome is. Either we get on top of them from the off, boo them in possession, cheer every throw in, or we sit there in silence and let them secure a comfy 2-0 win. I totally agree with what Sammy's saying there. Tuff says, give them a solid game, but get beaten by some unbelievable performance. Adrian says, if we play the way we have been playing, I'm expecting Haaland to get 15 goals in a season quicker than anyone has ever and will ever do. Although we tend to play better against top teams, so I'm thinking maybe a 2-1 or a 3-1 loss, but playing well enough to hope for a draw. Kai's been a little bit funny here, John, and says, I hope we get at least a throw in. Fair enough. Mickey says strong defensive display with the odd counter attack. Brian says 3-0 by half time to City. Unfortunately, I can't say anything other than getting battered. How's the bacon, did you say? Which is a very interesting handle. Says, I think we're about to take a serious hiding off Manchester City. The way we are playing, I could easily see it being 4 or 5. They put past us. Sean says, I'm hoping for a reaction. Neil says, let's get into those sky blue so-and-sos. Dominic says, City to dominate the ball, Newcastle to attempt to defend well and hit Man City on the break. We will have to play better than they have been so far this season to get anything. YI says we need a formation change, Tonali in the starting 11, but most importantly, we need all 11 players on the pitch to show heart, passion and desire to put in a 90-minute battling performance. We may not win, but let's not make it easy for them. And I think that's probably the tweet I want to concentrate on because, that's really been missing. That passion and that commitment and that kind of fighting for each other. Last season when it wasn't going well and you had all the injuries and people that were tired, there was still, it was one team. But I haven't really seen that this season. I go back to that game against Fulham where was the reaction? Where was the reaction to the goals conceded? Where was the player running over to Nick Pope saying it's going to be all right, head up? It just wasn't there. And we need to see it back on Saturday, don't we? That passion and that effort and that commitment.
Newcastle at the best have always had two things for me, and this goes way beyond Eddie's days as well, and the Saudis, and throughout the history of Newcastle that I've known, both as a fan and as a writer. Newcastle are at the best one when they are totally united against all the odds and full of aggression and belief in each other and passion, which is reflected by the crowd being exactly the same and going with them. And second, Newcastle are always at the best, I think, at home when they play on the front foot, when they start very, very quickly and get about sides. And I always remember Manchester City playing up here. I think they won in the end, but Maxi absolutely terrorised Kyle Walker. And not many people are capable of doing that. And Kyle Walker's as quick as he can get. Maxi absolutely terrorised him. Mind, we never saw Maxi for the next 6 games because that's what he did. Once he had a good game, he disappeared up his own trouser leg. But he was terrific in that game, and they were absolutely shocked by it. I mean, we have got to show that team bonding, that the body language hasn't got to be, oh dear me, I'm sorry for myself, we're not playing well, what on earth's gone wrong, etc. That's got to be all binned, and we've got to go out there, every single player, ready to turn blood to water on behalf of the cause. And then we might have a chance. We might still not win. I mean, I have given you reasons to have some optimism simply because you've got to have optimism. If you don't have optimism, then you lose, guaranteed. If you have optimism, you're probably still 80% chance that you still lose, but you've got a 20% chance you don't. And I mean, we're now going to get on to the result, no doubt. And like you, I actually think we will lose, but I think we will lose narrowly, like say a 2-1 or a 3-2, and with dignity. And that's it. And with determination and by having a go. I want the players, when the final whistle goes, to be applauded. Not because we've won or we've got a fluky goal or anything, but because we've had a genuine goal. And Geordies are proud of those representing them because they had a go against the best side in the land. I want to hear applause on the final whistle. And I've got a feeling we'll get something like that. I think we'll get beat, but I think we'll put on a performance. And you know what? If they do, we then go on and we beat Wimbledon. So in the next round of the League Cup, and then we go. I think it's to Everton, isn't it, in the next game? And we win there, and then we've lifted the mood again. So but we have got to start getting results because in the next 5 games, if I'm right, we play Man City, we play Chelsea away, and we'll play Arsenal at home. That's 3 of our next 5. Now, they're 3 very tough games to get draws in, considering it's Man City, considering it's Chelsea not up here but away, and considering it's Arsenal. That's 2 of the best sides in the Premier League, Man City and Arsenal, with Chelsea in there as well. So it's going to be tough. It is tough. But then again, mate, if you look at the fixtures we've had to play until now, they've been an easy, gentle start to the season. We haven't played big beasts, so they're bound to be coming up, and they're coming up now. So we better get our attitude right and then hope that our form comes on the back of the attitude. Um, and we've always been what I call a big hearted team, haven't we? Newcastle at their best are a big hearted team. They're one for all and one all for one, and the business with the fans and etc. etc. We need that. Um, I do think this will be one match too far for us. And I would have thought that if we'd beaten Fulham, City are a different ball game, and I think it'll be one match too far for us in terms of we're at home, but we can lose at home. Um, but let us at least at the end of it be proud if people in black and white. That is what is very, very important. Let's be proud of the performance put on and say, well, look, they left everything out there. All right, we lost 2-1, we lost 3-2, but they left everything out there, and that's more like it. And you know what? Newcastle fans over the years, all the years I've followed the club, Andrew, Newcastle fans, if you give everything for the shirt, they'll forgive you. It's when you
Yeah,
don't.
yeah.
It's when you don't.
Yeah, I'm hoping to see a reaction. We definitely need to see reaction, but I can't see anything other than a Manchester City win, and I do fear that it might be a bit of a drubbing, 3 or 4-0 defeat. Unfortunately, I really do hope I'm wrong, but I just think a week's not long enough to solve the issues of the space between the midfield and the defence, and all the issues are there for Eddie Howe to solve. And then it's Manchester City, arguably the best club in the world. I think the game's just at a total wrong time for Newcastle United. And then, I can't say anything other than a defeat. And I think it'll be a heavy one. I do think we'll see an improved performance, but I just think, especially that space between the midfield and the defence, will just be too easily to be exploited by Man City. So, unfortunately, I'm going for a heavy defeat. Like I say, I hope I'm wrong, but I'm not going to lie to you, John. I'm not going to lie to our listeners or our viewers. That's the way I'm
And
feeling.
Andrew,
Yeah,
you
I
know
think I
what
have
I
to be
hope?
honest.
What I would like Eddie to do then on Saturday at about 12 o'clock after he's told them what the team is and how tactically he wants them to play. I want to play my little snippet about what I would say in the dressing room, what you should do. And then I want him to play the snippet you just had there where you're fearing a real tonking. And if those two summings up don't stir anything in their loins, then they shouldn't be wearing the black and white of Newcastle United. So Eddie, play them those two, and it's nothing to do with. Don't say who's saying what. Just play the words. It's not a matter of me trying to get points or you not. Just let them play the words. This is what a Geordie thinks you should do today, and then this is what Geordies fear because of the way you've been playing this season. Let them listen to both, and if they're not stirred to go out there and run through brick walls, then really in January they should be crossing the time bridge permanently.
I would just say to them, go out and listen to that crowd, listen to the feeling out there, and then you've got to replicate that on the pitch. Because if you give half of what that crowd's going to give on Saturday, half of what you're going to hear as you walk through the tunnel and you hear Local Hero, then you will give Man City a damn good game and you will go close to pushing them. You've just got to match what those fans give you. And fingers crossed, look, I'm proved wrong. I would love to be sitting here on Monday morning with Aaron on the Monday show and saying quite happily I was proved wrong. So fingers crossed I am. John, thank you as always for providing the match preview. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Please give the video a thumbs up on YouTube. Do get into the comments about any of the talking points that we've discussed today. You can also drop us an email at the EIBW podcast at reachplc.com. If you're listening on the audio channel, thank you as always. Do leave us a rating and review. Head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news, including Eddie Howe's press conference on Friday morning before our live blog covering this game against Manchester City, starting very early on Saturday. For myself and John, we'll see you guys